So
Yeah.
Wendy Williams, right? I bet you saw those headlines about her and the police outside that facility where she was staying.
Yeah, unfortunately, the headlines, they just give you like these quick little snippets. They never tell the whole story.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, those little flashes, those news clips, they miss so much context, so much nuance.
Absolutely. And, sometimes they can even be really misleading.
Totally. I mean, in Wendy's case, it's been, well, it's been quite a saga, hasn't it?
Oh, it certainly has. And, this whole situation, it brings up some really important questions about, autonomy, about guardianship, and about mental health.
You hit the nail on the head there. There's definitely a lot more to unpack here than, what those quick headlines suggest.
So are you ready to take a deep dive into this?
Absolutely, let's do this. So in this deep dive, we're going to go beyond the surface, beyond the clickbait, right?
Yeah.
We're going to dig into Wendy Williams' own account of what happened that day.
Right, straight from the source. That's right.
Straight from the horse's mouth.
And we're going to be using her interview on Breakfast Club Power 105.1 FM. And, I think that's important, right? We're not speculating. We're going straight to what she said.
Right, absolutely. I mean, that's the most powerful perspective we can have.
Absolutely. And we're also going to get insights from Gina, president of Connect Care Advisory Group, who has been closely involved in Wendy's situation.
Exactly.
So, think of Gina as like that boots on the ground, firsthand knowledge of what's really going on behind the scenes.
Exactly.
Now, the big question we're going to tackle here, what exactly went down,
All
right?
right.
What led to the police showing up, the hospital visit, and those competency exams everyone's been talking about?
Yeah, the competency exams, that's a big one.
We'll get into that. We'll
Yeah.
get into that. So we're going to pull directly from the transcript of that Breakfast Club interview,
Okay.
right? We're not pulling punches here. So let's dive in, all right?
Okay.
What was the catalyst for those police officers showing up outside that facility? Okay. So it started with Wendy, right? She's expressing that she's feeling exhausted.
Okay.
She needs to go to the hospital. She wants a medical evaluation. Like, she needs a doctor to assess her situation.
Right. And Gina kind of fills in some details here, right?
Mhm.
She had initially contacted Adult Protective Services,
PPS.
APS, right?
Right. Think of it as that organization that steps in, when there are concerns about an adult's safety, their well-being, especially if they're potentially vulnerable.
Right, if they can't advocate for themselves.
Exactly. So Gina had already reached out to them due to concerns about Wendy's isolation.
Right.
But the police getting involved, that was like a more immediate decision, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So during their morning call, Gina's talking to Wendy, and they decide, okay, we're going to call the police.
Wow, that's pretty,
Right.
that's a big step.
Yeah, it is.
It's like, call the police. What was the thinking there?
The focus really was on Wendy's isolation
Oh,
and, the need for her to get some help right then and there.
okay. So it was a collaborative decision between the two of them.
So they're on the same page. It's not like,
Oh, they're on the same page. Yeah.
okay,
They're definitely aligned in this. Yeah.
got it. And it wasn't like a casual cop at the door, was it?
Yeah.
I mean, Wendy talked about 4 police officers showing up at the coterie, that facility she was at.
I know. It's just serious response.
That is a serious response. And Wendy's interaction with them, like what she says to them, is really important,
Yeah, like, what does she tell them?
So she's like, look, I'm not incapacitated. And that word incapacitated, it's been like this central point of all the debate surrounding her,
Right, right.
And she's also questioning, like, why am I in the memory unit? So she's pointing out this potential mismatch
Right.
saying,
Interesting.
between how she sees her own abilities, her cognitive abilities,
Right.
and where she's been placed. What's striking is like her clarity in expressing her state of mind
Right. Yeah.
to law enforcement. Like she's directly addressing them, you know?
Advocating for herself. Right. She's like, this is my situation. This is how I see things.
Yeah. It definitely pushes back against any notion that she's, unable to communicate or understand what's happening around her.
Exactly. Exactly. That's a huge point. Like, she's not just passively accepting this. She's actively engaging, right? And expressing herself.
Right, right. Now, there was this rumor floating around about a note being dropped out of a window, right?
Right.
To, like, get help.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
Was that true? Was that what happened?
No, so they both clarified that, both Wendy and Gina.
Oh,
They're like, no, that wasn't what happened. Wendy mentioned that she did see a photographer outside,
Okay.
and she briefly thought about, maybe writing something,
Interesting.
But Gina was very firm that they called the police directly to request a welfare check. So it was a direct call for help, not some...
Not some cryptic note.
Right, right, exactly. Not some desperate attempt. It was a planned, coordinated...
Proactive.
Proactive.
Okay. So that's a very different picture, right, than like a secret note.
Yeah.
And it really shows Wendy and Gina taking control of the situation.
Right. They're not waiting for someone else to save them.
Yeah, they're taking charge.
You're taking charge. That's a big distinction.
Right, absolutely. And Gina, she really stepped up for Wendy when the police arrived, didn't she?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Gina was like, look, you guys got to help Wendy off the floor,
Really.
She's emphasizing this narrative that was being pushed by the Guardian.
The Guardian's saying she's incapacitated. Okay.
Yeah, that Wendy was incapacitated and that she needed to be in this locked unit.
Okay.
Right. So Gina's like, no, the police can't leave without Wendy,
Wow.
Like, she's really advocating for her.
Wow, that's intense. And it's interesting. Gina even expressed surprise at seeing Wendy walk.
Oh, right.
It's
Yeah.
like there might have been assumptions made about Wendy's physical abilities, too.
That's a great point.
Yes.
And then the way Wendy describes walking with the police, she's like, oh, it's exercise for my feet. It's so classic Wendy.
Oh, that's so Wendy.
Right.
Like, you can just hear her saying it.
Exactly. But it's also her reclaiming some agency in that moment,
Yeah, right.
It's like, hey, I'm still in control of my body.
I can still walk. Yeah, I can still walk.
Exactly.
Okay, so police arrive. Wendy talks to them. Gina steps up. They leave the facility, right?
Mm-hmm.
That takes us to the hospital. And that independent medical evaluation that she wanted.
Oh, right. That's the next chapter.
So tell me about that.
Okay, so Wendy says she's feeling anxious, and she specifically requests to go to the hospital for an independent medical evaluation.
Okay.
Right. It's not just like a routine checkup.
She wants a second opinion.
Right. She wants an unbiased assessment
Okay.
of her condition.
Got it. So it was very intentional on her part.
Oh, absolutely. This was a deliberate decision.
All right. And it sounds like the facility wasn't totally on board with that idea right away.
Right. So both Wendy and Gina, they describe how the facility offered an in-house nurse
Right.
and a doctor, like, we can handle this internally.
We got you covered.
Right.
Right.
But both Wendy and Gina are like, nope, we need an independent doctor
Going outside.
at an outside hospital.
And that really shows like how determined they were to get a truly objective evaluation.
Right. They're not messing around. They're serious about this.
Absolutely. And at this point, Wendy's lawyer gets involved.
Yes. So Wendy mentions she's on the phone with her lawyer,
Like-
who agrees to meet her at the hospital.
Okay.
And Gina confirms this, saying she also talked to the lawyer, who then goes to the hospital
Wow.
and stays with Wendy.
Okay, so they got their legal representation right there with them.
Yeah, having that support, that legal support, was super important,
Absolutely. So Wendy gets to the hospital.
Yeah.
What about these competency evaluations everyone's been talking about?
So Gina explained that the lawyer, he was crucial in persuading the doctors to do an evaluation, especially with the Guardian being there, and all these different perspectives and opinions in the room.
Right.
So they're like, let's get an official evaluation done.
Okay, so Wendy ends up taking 2 competency evaluations.
2.
Right. And just for everyone listening, these evaluations, they're meant to assess if someone can make sound decisions about their own life and affairs, right?
Exactly.
Okay, just
Good.
wanted to clarify that. And the results, they were pretty clear-cut, weren't they?
Oh, totally. Yeah. Perfect score. 10 out of 10 on both tests.
Wow, that's huge.
Right. And Wendy, she even gave examples of the questions like identifying the president, her birthday, basic things,
Yeah.
And she answered them all correctly.
So this directly contradicts that narrative that she was incapacitated.
Absolutely. It challenges the whole basis for her being deemed incapacitated.
Right.
It suggests like a major disconnect between what the Guardian's saying and Wendy's actual abilities.
Yeah. And there were some reports, I don't know if you saw these, saying that these independent medical exams couldn't be used going forward.
Right. I did see those.
What's the deal with that?
So both Wendy and Gina addressed that head on.
I shot that down.
Yeah, they were very clear. Gina said, look, this was a medical exam
Okay.
done by an independent doctor
Okay.
at a reputable hospital.
Right.
It absolutely can be used in court.
Okay.
So they were basically saying, those reports, they're just wrong.
All right. So that's a crucial clarification there.
Yeah, it's a big one.
So, based on Wendy's own words, these independent evaluations, she seems competent.
Right.
But her situation, it still sounds like an uphill battle.
Oh, yeah, without a doubt.
It's complex.
Totally.
So what kind of concerns and obstacles is she still facing?
Okay, so Wendy said that her guardian was actually at the hospital,
Okay.
but didn't talk to her.
Didn't say a word.
Not a word. And according to Wendy, her lawyer can back this up.
Wow. That silence speaks volumes, doesn't it?
It really does. And then Wendy's reaction to that Vanity Fair article where the Guardian claimed they had a good relationship was just like, she's lying,
Just straight up, she's lying.
point blank. And it really underscores the difference between the Guardian's public statements and Wendy's reality, you know?
It's two completely different stories.
It's two different worlds, yeah. And then she talked about the facility, describing it as super restrictive.
Like what?
She said, if I open the door, there's a person.
Wow, constant surveillance.
Constant.
Okay.
It makes you think, is that really the best environment for her if she is as capable as those tests suggest?
Right, right. And then there's that whole thing with the hospital address. That sounds almost intentional, like an attempt to isolate her even further.
Yeah, so Wendy said the Guardian gave her lawyer the wrong hospital address,
Really?
and she only knew where she was because she recognized the hospital herself.
Wow.
So it raises all these questions about transparency, about communication, like what's really going on here?
Yeah, it's fishy.
Yeah, it's definitely suspicious.
Yeah. And Wendy, I mean, she's clearly feeling like there's this effort to keep her hidden, to make people think she's incapacitated.
Right,
It's like
exactly.
she's not.
And she even mentioned that the Guardian allegedly said that Wendy doesn't know how to talk
Oh, God.
and that everything she says is scripted.
That's unbelievable.
Right. And Wendy's like, absolutely not.
She's denying that completely.
Completely. She's like, I'm speaking for myself.
Right.
And Gina supports this. She's like, the Guardian wanted the world to believe Wendy was incapacitated. She talked about how the Guardian gave Wendy a phone that couldn't even receive calls.
Can you imagine?
And that the Guardian underestimated Wendy's connections, her platform. It's a picture of a very controlled environment, a real power imbalance.
So it's this huge contract between what's being said publicly and what Wendy's saying about herself.
Yeah.
And, her ability to take action. She got the police involved. She went to the hospital. It's a very different story.
Exactly. It's a powerful reminder that there are always multiple sides to every story.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
So looking ahead, what did Wendy and Gina say about what's next?
So Wendy mentioned an upcoming call to The View, which I think is a great sign, She wants to share her side of things publicly.
Yeah, that's great. And Gina was really emphasizing their hope for an alternative to going back to that facility. She called it a luxury prison.
Yeah, luxury prison, which
Yeah.
tells you a lot about how they view that situation.
Right, right. And Wendy gave a shout out to the NYPD, thanking them for their help.
Yeah, which I thought was really touching,
Hey, go ahead.
It shows how important their intervention was. And Gina outlined the ongoing investigations by APS and the NYPD.
Okay, so those investigations are still in progress.
They are. She's really pushing for APS to recommend removing the Guardian and for Wendy to be in a less restrictive environment.
So APS could actually make that happen.
They have the authority, yeah. And at the time of the interview, Wendy was still at the hospital waiting for her lawyer. She mentioned that there were some things she couldn't talk about regarding the hospital stay, so it's clear there are still some sensitive legal things going on.
Okay, so we have to respect that.
But she did find some positive things about being at the hospital. She talked about meeting supportive people, and she even shared that she was craving Chipotle and some specific food items that she couldn't get at the facility.
It's a good reminder that behind all this, there's a real person with, cravings and everyday desires.
Exactly. And she even addressed a comment about not saying how you doing enough, which shows that she's still very aware of her public image and that Wendy Williams persona,
Still there,
Yeah.
All right, so just to recap, Wendy Williams, with Gina by her side, took action that led to the police getting involved, and then she went to the hospital where she passed those competency tests with flying colors, which, really challenges that narrative that she's completely incapacitated.
Yes, exactly. This whole situation is incredibly complex, and there are clearly some conflicting perspectives at play here, especially when it comes to her guardianship.
Listening to this all unfold, it makes you think, what happens when someone's own account of their capabilities and well-being is so different from the public perception or the legal stance?
Yeah, it's a big question. And I think it also highlights the importance of self-advocacy, of having your voice heard, even when you're facing obstacles and people who might be doubting your abilities.
So to all our listeners out there, you now have a much deeper understanding of this situation than what you might have gotten from those quick news snippets you've heard directly from Wendy and from someone who's actively involved in advocating for her.
Right. And hopefully it sparked some thoughts about individual autonomy, about guardianship, and the complexities of mental health.
Absolutely. And, it's clear that Wendy's story is still unfolding.
Yeah.
You've shed some light on recent events, but there's definitely more to come. Thanks for joining us as we dug into this complex and, frankly, quite fascinating situation.
Absolutely is a pleasure.
We'll see you next time.
See you then.